My name is David, and what I'm about to tell you will make you question everything you think you know about the people living next door. 3 weeks ago, I installed a security camera system in my house after a series of break-ins in our neighborhood. I thought I was protecting my family. Instead, I uncovered a truth so disturbing that I haven't slept properly since. The person I've trusted for 15 years, the man who helped me move furniture, who borrowed sugar from my kitchen, who attended my daughter's birthday parties, has been entering my house every single night for God knows how long, and the footage I captured will haunt me forever. Let me start from the beginning, because the details matter, and every single one of them makes this story more terrifying than the last. I live on Maple Street in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where kids ride bikes until dark, and neighbors know each other by name. My next-door neighbor, Robert Martinez, moved in 2 years before my family and I did. When we first arrived with our U-Haul truck, Robert was the first person to introduce himself. He was in his mid-40s then, divorced, living alone in a modest 2-story house that mirrored ours exactly. Over the years, Robert became more than just a neighbor. He became a friend. When my wife Sarah was pregnant with our second child, Robert would check on her when I was traveling for work. When Hurricane Maria hit our area 3 years ago, we sheltered together in his basement because it was more secure than ours. Last Christmas, he joined us for dinner because he had nowhere else to go. Robert works as a computer technician for the local school district. He's quiet, methodical, and incredibly helpful. If my lawnmower broke, Robert would fix it. If I needed someone to watch the house while we were on vacation, Robert was our go-to person. In fact, we gave him a spare key 5 years ago, and he gave us one too. It seemed natural, neighborly, safe. That key is what makes this entire situation so much worse. The break-ins in our neighborhood started about 2 months ago. 3 houses were burglarized in 4 weeks, all during daytime hours when families were at work or school. The thieves were professional, taking only valuable electronics and jewelry, leaving no obvious signs of forced entry. The police suggested that residents invest in security systems, and after some discussion, Sarah and I decided to install cameras. We chose a comprehensive system with 4 exterior cameras and 2 interior cameras, one in the living room and one in the kitchen. The cameras recorded continuously and stored footage on a cloud-based server. I could access the feeds from my phone anywhere in the world. It seemed like the perfect solution to keep our family safe. The installation took place on a Tuesday. By Thursday evening, I was already checking the app obsessively, watching mail carriers and delivery drivers go about their business. There's something oddly fascinating about seeing your daily life from a security camera perspective. Everything looks different, more clinical, more suspicious. The first time I noticed something unusual was on Saturday night. I was lying in bed around 11:30 p.m. when I received a motion alert on my phone. I opened the app, expecting to see a cat or maybe a raccoon triggering the sensor. Instead, I saw Robert walking across my backyard toward my house. At first, I wasn't alarmed. Robert sometimes retrieved balls or frisbees that landed in his yard from our kids playing. Maybe something had blown over from his property, or maybe he needed to tell me something urgent. I watched as he approached the back door, and that's when I saw him pull out a key. My key. I watched, frozen in disbelief, as Robert unlocked my back door and entered my house. The interior camera in the kitchen captured him perfectly. He moved with purpose, like someone who had done this many times before. He wasn't hurried or nervous. He wasn't looking around suspiciously or acting like an intruder. He moved through my kitchen like it was his own home. I should have jumped out of bed. I should have called the police. I should have confronted him immediately, but I didn't. I was paralyzed by shock and confusion. This was Robert, our trusted neighbor, our friend. There had to be an explanation. I watched as he opened my refrigerator and took a drink of water. He stood in my kitchen for almost 10 minutes, just looking around, touching things. He picked up a photo of my family from the counter and stared at it for a long time. Then he walked into the living room. The living room camera showed him sitting on our couch, in the exact spot where Sarah usually sits to watch television. He turned on the TV with our remote and watched for about 20 minutes. He seemed completely comfortable, completely at ease. At one point, he even put his feet up on our coffee table. After watching television, Robert got up and walked toward the stairs. The cameras didn't cover the second floor, so I couldn't see where he went or what he did up there. But he was upstairs for over 30 minutes. 30 minutes in the part of my house where my wife and children were sleeping. The thought makes me sick even now. When Robert finally came back downstairs, he turned off the television, returned the remote to its exact position, and headed back to the kitchen. He threw away his empty water bottle, making sure to push it down into the trash so it wasn't visible. Then he unlocked the back door and left, locking it behind him. The entire visit lasted 1 hour and 7 minutes. I lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling, trying to process what I had witnessed. By morning, I had almost convinced myself that I had imagined it, that there was some logical explanation I was missing. But the footage was there, time-stamped and crystal clear. At breakfast, I studied Sarah's face for any sign that she had heard something during the night. She seemed normal, chatting about her plans for the day and helping the kids with their cereal. I wanted to tell her what I had seen, but something held me back. Maybe I was still hoping there was an innocent explanation. That afternoon, when Robert waved to me from his yard, I waved back. I even managed to smile, but inside, I felt like I was going to vomit. How long had this been going on? What did he do when he went upstairs? Why was he coming into our house? I made a decision that I now realize was probably stupid, but at the time seemed reasonable. I decided to review all the footage from the previous week to see if this was an isolated incident or part of a pattern. I told myself I needed evidence, that I needed to understand the scope of what was happening before I could decide what to do about it. And I waited until Sarah and the kids went to bed that night, then locked myself in my home office with my laptop. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, thinking it might steady my nerves, and began methodically reviewing every hour of footage from the past 7 days. What I found was so much worse than I could have imagined. Robert had entered our house every single night since the cameras had been installed. Every single night. The pattern was always the same. He would arrive between 11 p.m. and midnight, always using the back door, always moving with the same confident familiarity. But as I watched each night's footage in chronological order, I began to see disturbing variations in his behavior that suggested this routine had been evolving over time. The first night after camera installation, Robert's visit lasted only 18 minutes. He seemed almost cautious, moving quickly through the kitchen and spending just a few minutes in the living room before leaving. But by the third night, he was staying for over 45 minutes. By the fifth night, he had brought a small flashlight, which he used to examine photographs and documents on our kitchen counter without turning on the overhead lights. On the sixth night, I watched in horror as Robert opened our refrigerator and helped himself to leftover Chinese food, eating it directly from the container while standing at our kitchen island. He used our utensils, our napkins, our space as if he had every right to be there. When he finished eating, he washed the container and utensil, dried them, and put them back exactly where they belonged. The seventh night's footage was the most disturbing yet. So Robert brought a small notebook with him, and I watched him sit at our kitchen table for over 20 minutes, writing. What was he documenting? What observations was he recording about our family, our home, our lives? But it wasn't just the frequency that disturbed me. It was the progression of his behavior and the increasingly personal nature of his intrusions. On the first night, he had only stayed for about 20 minutes, mostly in the kitchen. By the third night, he was staying for over an hour and had begun exploring other rooms. By the fifth night, he was clearly comfortable enough to help himself to food from our refrigerator. On the sixth night, I watched him use our bathroom, and I noticed he spent several minutes examining the contents of our medicine cabinet. Our medicine cabinet. the place where we kept our prescriptions, our personal hygiene items, our most private necessities. He was learning about our health, our medical conditions, our intimate routines. But the footage from Friday night was the most disturbing of all. That night, Robert brought something with him that made my blood run cold. It was a camera, a small digital camera that he used to photograph documents on our kitchen counter, pictures on our refrigerator, and personal items throughout our house. He wasn't just invading our space anymore. He was documenting it, creating a record of our private lives that he could review later, share with others, or use for purposes I didn't want to contemplate. I watched, horrified and transfixed, as Robert methodically photographed our family calendar, which detailed the children's school schedules, Sarah's work meetings, my travel dates, and our weekend plans. He took pictures of our mail, our utility bills, our children's artwork hanging on the refrigerator. He even photographed the inside of our refrigerator itself, documenting what food we ate, what brands we preferred, what our dietary habits revealed about our lifestyle. But the most chilling moment came when Robert went upstairs. While I couldn't see what he was doing up there, I could see the light from his camera flash reflecting off the walls and ceiling. He was taking pictures in our bedrooms, in our children's rooms, in the most private spaces of our home. When he came back downstairs, 25 minutes later, he was carrying something else. A small bag that he had brought upstairs empty, but now appeared to contain items. What had he taken from our bedrooms? What personal belongings? What intimate objects? What pieces of our private lives had he stolen? I paused the footage and stared at the timestamp, 12:47 a.m. While my family and I slept peacefully upstairs, believing we were safe in our own home, a man we trusted was systematically cataloging our possessions and stealing pieces of our lives. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't random criminal behavior. This was methodical, organized stalking. Robert wasn't just entering our house out of curiosity or opportunity. He was conducting surveillance, gathering intelligence, building a comprehensive profile of our family that went far beyond what any neighbor should know. I realized I had to tell Sarah, but first, I needed to understand the full extent of what we were dealing with. I spent the next 3 hours reviewing footage, taking notes, documenting every detail of Robert's intrusions. I created a timeline of his visits, noting the duration of each stay, the rooms he entered, the items he touched, and any objects he appeared to photograph or remove. The pattern that emerged was terrifying in its thoroughness. Robert wasn't just casually exploring our house, he was conducting systematic reconnaissance. He examined our mail to learn about our finances and correspondence. He photographed our calendar to track our schedules and routines. He went through our kitchen drawers and cabinets, apparently cataloging our belongings and preferences. Most disturbing of all, he spent significant time in areas where our personal information was stored. He photographed documents from my home office, including tax returns, insurance policies, and bank statements. He examined Sarah's purse when she left it on the kitchen counter, photographing her driver's license and credit cards. He even looked through our children's backpacks, documenting their school assignments and personal belongings. This wasn't opportunistic burglary or even typical stalking behavior. This was comprehensive identity harvesting. Robert was systematically collecting enough information to potentially assume our identities, access our accounts, or harm us in ways that went far beyond simple trespass. By the time I finished reviewing all the footage, it was nearly 4 a.m., and I was shaking, not just from fear but from rage. This man who we had trusted, who had been part of our family's life for 15 years, had been systematically violating every boundary of privacy and security. He had turned our home into his personal research facility and us into his unwitting subjects. But there was something else troubling me, something beyond the immediate violation. If Robert had been doing this for only 1 week since the cameras were installed, how long had he been doing it before that? The cameras had revealed his behavior, but they hadn't caused it. This level of systematic intrusion suggested months or even years of practice. I thought back over the past year, looking for signs I might have missed. Were there times when items in our house seemed slightly out of place? Were there mornings when the TV remote wasn't quite where we had left it? Or when food seemed to disappear from the refrigerator faster than we remembered eating it? Had there been subtle changes in our daily environment that we had attributed to forgetfulness or coincidence? The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that Robert's midnight visits had been going on for much longer than 1 week, which meant that everything I thought I knew about our family's privacy and security over the past several months, or possibly years, had been an illusion. This had gone beyond something I could handle alone, and Sarah deserved to know that our home, our sanctuary, our entire sense of safety had been systematically compromised by someone we considered family. But I also knew that once I told her, there would be no going back. Our relationship with Robert, our sense of security, our entire understanding of our neighborhood would be forever changed. More than that, I would have to tell her that our children had been exposed to this violation, that their bedrooms had been photographed, that their personal belongings had been cataloged by a man whose true intentions we could only guess at. I closed my laptop and sat in the darkness of my office, trying to process the magnitude of what I had discovered. In less than 24 hours, my understanding of our family's safety and privacy had been completely shattered. A man we trusted with our spare key, a man we invited to family celebrations, a man our children called Uncle Robert, had been conducting covert surveillance operations in our home. But the most terrifying realization was still to come, because as I sat there in the darkness, I began to wonder if Robert could do this to us, if he could maintain this deception for so long while living right next door and interacting with us daily. What else was he capable of? And what had he been planning to do with all the information and photographs he had been collecting? The thought made me physically sick. I chose a Sunday morning to tell Sarah after the kids had gone to play at their friend's house down the street. I had spent the previous day rehearsing what I would say, trying to find words that would convey the seriousness of the situation without causing panic. But as I began to speak, I realized that there was no gentle way to tell someone that their most basic assumptions about safety and privacy had been violated. Alauda PM showed her the footage on my laptop, starting with the most recent night and working backwards. I watched her face change from confusion to disbelief to horror to rage as she absorbed the reality of what Robert had been doing. "How long?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "How long has he been doing this?" "I don't know," I admitted. "The cameras have only been active for a week, but based on how comfortable he seems, how well he knows where everything is, I think it's been going on much longer. Possibly months, maybe even years." Sarah stood up abruptly and walked to the window overlooking Robert's house. Her hands were shaking as she gripped the windowsill. "He's been in our bedroom," she said, her voice growing stronger with anger. "He's been watching our children sleep. Oh God, David. What if he's done something to them? What if he's hurt them and they're too scared to tell us?" "How long?" she whispered. "How long has he been doing this?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe since we gave him the key. Maybe longer." Sarah stood up abruptly and walked to the window overlooking Robert's house. "He's been in our bedroom," she said, her voice shaking. "He's been watching our children sleep. Oh God, David. What if he's done something to them? What if he's hurt them?" That possibility had been eating at me for days, but I had forced myself not to think about it directly. Hearing Sarah's voice, it made it real and immediate and terrifying. The idea that our children might have been harmed, that they might be carrying trauma we didn't even know about, was unbearable. "There's more," I said quietly, and I showed her the footage of Robert photographing documents, going through personal items, and systematically documenting our private lives. Sarah watched in silence as Robert photographed our family calendar, our financial documents, our children's school information. When the footage showed him going through her purse and photographing her identification and credit cards, she made a sound that was half sob, half growl. "He has our financial information," she said. "He could steal our identities, access our accounts, destroy our credit. This isn't just trespassing, David. This is identity theft in progress." I hadn't fully considered the financial implications of Robert's documentation, but Sarah was right. With the information he had photographed, Robert could potentially cause devastating financial harm to our family. He could open credit accounts in our names, access our bank information, or even steal the children's identities for long-term fraud schemes. "We need to call the police," she said, reaching for her phone. "I know. But first, I think we should talk to the kids. Ask them if they've ever noticed anything strange, anything that seemed off, and we need to check our financial accounts. Make sure he hasn't already started using our information." The next hour was a blur of phone calls and computer searches. While Sarah called our bank and credit card companies to alert them to potential identity theft and request new account numbers, I logged into our online accounts to check for any unauthorized activity. What I found made the situation even worse. Someone had attempted to log into our online banking account 3 times in the past month, using incorrect passwords. The attempts had come from an IP address that, according to the bank's security logs, was traced to our general neighborhood. Someone had also requested a credit report in Sarah's name 2 weeks earlier, though the request had been denied due to incorrect verification information. Robert hadn't just been preparing for identity theft. He had already started attempting it. "Sarah," I called from my computer. "You need to see this." She came over and looked at the screen, her face growing paler as she read the security logs and credit report attempts. "He's been trying to access our accounts," she said. "How long has this been going on? What else has he done that we don't know about?" Before I could answer, we heard the front door open and the sounds of our children returning from their friend's house. Sarah and I looked at each other, both thinking the same thing. We needed to talk to Emma and Jake, but we had to be careful not to traumatize them further than they might already have been. We called them into the living room and sat them down on the couch between us. I tried to keep my voice calm and reassuring, but inside I was terrified of what we might learn. "We need to talk to you about something important," I began. "It's about Mr. Martinez from next door. Have you ever seen him inside our house when Mommy and I weren't awake?" Emma and Jake looked at each other, and I saw something pass between them, a look of recognition, maybe even relief, as if they had been waiting for someone to ask this question. "You mean at night?" Emma asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. My blood ran cold. The fact that she immediately knew what I was referring to meant this wasn't a one-time occurrence they had witnessed. "Yes, at night. Tell us what you've seen." Emma looked down at her hands, clearly uncomfortable. "Sometimes I hear the TV when I get up to use the bathroom, but you and Mommy are sleeping, so I thought maybe you left it on by accident. But one time I looked downstairs and saw Mr. Martinez sitting on our couch." "When did you first notice this?" Sarah asked gently, though I could hear the tension in her voice. Emma thought for a moment, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Maybe after my birthday party, the one where Mr. Martinez helped with the decorations. So like 3 or 4 months ago." 3 or 4 months. The timeline was even worse than I had feared. Robert had been entering our house regularly for at least that long, possibly longer. "What did you do when you saw him?" I asked Emma. "I was scared to go downstairs to use the bathroom, so I used the one in your room instead," she said. "I thought maybe he was helping you with something, but you were both asleep." "Did you ever talk to him? Did he ever see you?" Sarah asked. Emma shook her head, but Jake, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. "I talked to him," Jake said quietly, his 7-year-old voice filled with what sounded like guilt. Sarah and I exchanged a look of alarm. "When did you talk to him, sweetie?" Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice calm. "A few times," Jake admitted. "Sometimes when I get up to get water, He's in the kitchen. He always says hi and asks if I'm okay. He told me it was our special secret and that I shouldn't tell anyone because it might make you and Mommy worry. The room fell silent, except for the sound of my heart pounding in my ears. Robert hadn't just been entering our house and violating our privacy. He had been interacting with our 7-year-old son, manipulating him into keeping secrets, creating a relationship based on deception and manipulation. What else did Mr. Martinez say to you? I asked Jake, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. He said he was checking to make sure we were safe while you and Mommy were sleeping. Jake explained. He said it was like being a secret security guard. He told me I was a good boy for not being scared. The manipulation was sophisticated and calculated. Robert had presented himself as a protector rather than an intruder, making Jake feel special and brave rather than frightened. It was the kind of psychological manipulation that predators use to groom children, and the thought made me want to drive straight to Robert's house and confront him immediately. Did he ever ask you to do anything or touch you in any way? Sarah asked, her voice tight with controlled fear. No, Jake said quickly. He just asked about school sometimes, and if I liked my toys. One time he asked if I remembered my dreams. Your dreams, I repeated. Why would he ask about your dreams? Jake shrugged. I don't know. He said dreams were important and that I should tell him if I had any scary ones. Sarah grabbed my hand so tightly that her nails dug into my palm. The idea that Robert was trying to access our child's subconscious thoughts, that he was attempting to understand Jake's psychological state, suggested a level of psychological manipulation that went far beyond simple trespass. Anything else? I asked Emma. Sometimes my stuffed animals are in different places when I wake up, Emma admitted, her voice growing smaller. So I put Mr. Bear on the right side of my pillow, but sometimes he's on the left side in the morning, and sometimes my diary isn't where I left it. Your diary? Sarah's voice was sharp with alarm. Emma nodded. I keep it in my desk drawer, but sometimes it's on top of my desk in the morning. I thought maybe I forgot where I put it. The violation was even more extensive than I had realized. Robert hadn't just been photographing our documents and belongings. He had been reading our 9-year-old daughter's diary, accessing her most private thoughts and feelings. What do you write about in your diary? I asked Emma gently. Just stuff, Emma said, clearly embarrassed. About school and friends, and sometimes about you and Mommy when you're fighting. When we're fighting? Sarah asked, surprised. Not really fighting, Emma clarified quickly. But sometimes you have those conversations with quiet voices when you think we can't hear. I wrote about how it makes me feel worried. Robert had been reading about our family's private conflicts, our children's emotional responses to marital tension, our most intimate family dynamics. He had access to information that even close family members wouldn't normally know. Is there anything else? I asked both children. Anything at all that seemed strange or different? Jake raised his hand slightly, as if he were in school. Sometimes I wake up and my door is open, but I always close it before I go to sleep. And one time, I found a piece of candy on my nightstand that I didn't remember putting there. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Robert had been entering our children's bedrooms while they slept. He had been close enough to touch them, close enough to harm them, close enough to do things that I couldn't bear to contemplate. What kind of candy? Sarah asked, though her voice was shaking. A peppermint, Jake said. The kind Mr. Martinez always has in his pocket. Robert had been leaving tokens in our child's bedroom, marking his presence, creating a trail of evidence that he had been there. It was either incredibly careless or deliberately provocative, and I wasn't sure which possibility was more frightening. Are we going to get in trouble? Emma asked again, sensing the gravity of the situation from our reactions. No, you're not in trouble, I told them firmly. You did nothing wrong. In fact, you're being very brave by telling us the truth. But from now on, if any adult asks you to keep a secret from Mommy and me, you tell us right away, okay? even if there's someone we know and trust, especially if there's someone we know and trust. After the children went back outside to play, Sarah and I sat in stunned silence. The violation felt exponentially more personal now, more sinister. It wasn't just about Robert entering our house. It was about him systematically manipulating our children, accessing their private thoughts, and creating inappropriate relationships based on secrecy and deception. "We're calling the police right now," Sarah said, reaching for her phone with trembling hands. "Wait," I said, though every instinct told me to call immediately. "Let me check something first. If we're going to report this, I want to make sure we have all the evidence documented properly." I opened the security app on my phone and began scrolling through the previous night's footage, this time with the horrifying knowledge of what Robert had been doing to our children. Sarah looked over my shoulder as I played the video, both of us watching with new understanding of the violation we were witnessing. There was Robert, right on schedule, entering our house at 11:43 p.m. But now, knowing what to look for, I could see details that I had missed before. This wasn't casual exploration or opportunistic theft. This was methodical, practiced surveillance. Robert moved through our house with the confidence of someone who had memorized every creaking floorboard, every squeaky hinge, every potential obstacle. He knew exactly how to move without disturbing us, suggesting months or years of practice. In the kitchen, he opened the refrigerator and examined its contents. But this time, I noticed he was photographing the interior with his phone, documenting our food preferences and dietary habits. He pulled out a small notebook and spent several minutes writing while standing at our kitchen counter. What observations was he recording? What details about our family's life was he preserving for future reference? In the living room, he didn't just sit on the couch and watch television. He systematically examined the contents of our coffee table drawers, photographed the titles of books on our shelves, and even checked the settings on our cable box. He was gathering intelligence about our entertainment preferences, our reading habits, our technology usage patterns. But the most chilling part came when he went upstairs. Although the cameras couldn't follow him to the second floor, I could track his movement by the motion-activated night lights we had installed in the hallway and bathroom. The pattern of light showed him moving methodically from room to room, spending significant time in each location. When he came back downstairs 38 minutes later, he was carrying something that made my stomach lurch. It was one of Emma's school photos, the wallet-sized prints that we had ordered from her class pictures. He sat at our kitchen table and spent several minutes examining the photograph with a small magnifying glass that he had brought with him. A magnifying glass. Robert was conducting forensic-level examination of our children's photographs. After studying Emma's picture, he carefully placed it in a small plastic bag and put it in his pocket. He had stolen a photograph of our 9-year-old daughter and was preserving it like evidence in a criminal investigation. "Sarah," I whispered, pausing the video. "Look at this." She watched as I replayed the segment showing Robert examining and stealing Emma's photograph. Her face went white, and for a moment I thought she might faint. "He's building a collection," she said in a voice I barely recognized. "He's not just violating our home, he's creating some kind of archive of our family." I continued playing the footage, and we watched Robert perform what could only be described as a systematic inventory of our personal belongings. He opened drawers and cabinets throughout the kitchen, photographing the contents with clinical precision. He examined prescription bottles in our medicine cabinet, writing down information in his notebook. He even checked the batteries in our smoke detectors and carbon monoxide alarms. The level of thoroughness was staggering. Robert wasn't just trespassing or even stalking in any conventional sense. He was conducting comprehensive surveillance that would be impressive if it were being done by law enforcement with proper warrants and legal authority. But this was being done by our neighbor, our friend, someone we trusted with our children and our home security. "There's something else," I said, remembering details from earlier footage that now seemed even more sinister. "Let me show you what he did 2 nights ago." I scrolled back to the footage from Tuesday night and found the segment I was looking for. Robert was in our home office, sitting at my desk, using my computer. "He's using our computer?" Sarah asked, incredulous. "Watch," I said. The footage showed Robert typing for over 20 minutes, occasionally pausing to consult his notebook. He appeared to be entering information into some kind of database or spreadsheet program. After finishing his data entry, he inserted a USB drive into the computer and began transferring files. "He's copying our personal files," Sarah said, "our photos, our documents, our financial records." But it was worse than that. I watched as Robert navigated through our family photo folders, spending particular attention on pictures of the children. He was selecting specific images and copying them to his USB drive, building his own personal collection of our family memories. "How is this possible?" Sarah asked. "How does he know our computer passwords?" That was when I remembered something that had seemed innocent at the time, but now appeared sinister. About 6 months earlier, Robert had helped me set up a new printer and had asked about our wireless network password so he could test the printer's connectivity from his house. I had given him our Wi-Fi password without a second thought. The Wi-Fi password, or, he said, 6 months ago when he helped with the printer installation. If he's been monitoring our network traffic, he could have captured our computer passwords, our email logins, even our online banking credentials. Sarah stared at me in horror. "You mean he might have access to everything? Our emails, our financial accounts, our online communications?" The possibility was terrifying. If Robert had been monitoring our network and capturing passwords, the scope of his surveillance extended far beyond physical intrusion into our house. He could potentially read our private emails, monitor our online activities, and access our most sensitive digital information. I immediately grabbed my laptop and began checking our online accounts for suspicious activity. What I found confirmed our worst fears. Our email account showed that someone had been accessing it regularly from an IP address in our neighborhood. The login times correlated exactly with Robert's midnight visits to our house. He had been reading our private correspondence, our work communications, our personal conversations. Our cloud storage account, where we kept family photos and important documents, showed similar unauthorized access. Robert had been browsing through years of our family memories, downloading pictures of our children, our vacations, our most intimate moments. "Sarah," I called, my voice barely steady. "Come look at this." She came over to the computer, and I showed her the access logs and download history. Someone had been systematically downloading our family photos, particularly images of the children. They had accessed our financial documents, our tax returns, our insurance policies. They had even downloaded videos from the children's birthday parties and school events. "He's been building a comprehensive profile of our family for months," Sarah said, her voice hollow with shock. "He knows more about us than we know about ourselves." But there was more. Our home automation system, which controlled our thermostat, security system, and smart devices, showed that someone had been accessing it regularly. Robert had been monitoring our daily routines through our own technology, tracking when we came and went, when we turned lights on and off, even when we adjusted the temperature. He knew when we were home, when we were away, when we were sleeping, when we were awake. He had turned our own smart home technology into a surveillance network that fed him real-time information about our activities. "We need to call the police now," Sarah said, her voice stronger now, filled with determination rather than fear. "This isn't just trespassing, this is organized stalking, identity theft, computer crimes, and God knows what else." I nodded, but first, I wanted to secure our digital accounts and protect our family from further intrusion. I immediately began changing passwords, enabling two-factor authentication, and blocking access to our network from unknown devices. As I worked, Sarah called the police and explained the situation. Within minutes, we were told that multiple units were being dispatched. including detectives from the cybercrime division and officers trained in stalking cases. While we waited for the police to arrive, I made one final discovery that changed everything. Hidden deep in our computer's temporary files, I found evidence that Robert had been using our internet connection to access illegal content. He had been using our network to view and download images that I couldn't bear to describe, images involving children that made me physically sick. "Sarah," I called weakly, "don't look at this, but I found something else, something that makes this situation much worse than we thought." She came over despite my warning, took one look at the screen, and immediately turned away. "Oh God," she whispered. "Oh God, what has he been doing? What was he planning to do to our children?" The police arrived within 15 minutes, but it felt like hours. Officer Martinez led a team that included Detective Sarah Chen from the Cybercrime Unit and Detective Mike Rodriguez, who specialized in stalking and harassment cases. Their presence transformed our living room into an impromptu command center as they began documenting evidence and taking our statements. "This is one of the most comprehensive stalking cases I've ever seen," Detective Chen said after reviewing our computer logs and security footage. "The level of digital intrusion, combined with physical trespass, suggests someone with significant technical knowledge and experience." Detective Rodriguez was equally disturbed by the psychological manipulation of our children. "The way he groomed your son to keep secrets, the items he moved in your daughter's room, the photographs he stole. These are classic predator behaviors. We need to consider the possibility that he was escalating toward more serious crimes." Officer Martinez coordinated the team's activities while maintaining communication with units that had been dispatched to Robert's house. "We have a warrant for his arrest and another warrant to search his property," she told us. "Based on what you've shown us, we have probable cause for multiple felony charges." As the officers worked, I realized that our ordeal was far from over. Even with Robert in custody, the damage had been done. Our privacy had been shattered. Our children had been traumatized, and our sense of security would never fully recover. "What happens next?" Sarah asked Detective Rodriguez. "We'll process the crime scene, your house, and gather all available evidence," he explained. "We'll analyze the computer files, the security footage, and any physical evidence Robert may have left behind. Then we'll search his property and see what additional evidence we can find there." "What about our children?" Sarah asked. "Do they need to be interviewed?" "Eventually, yes, but we'll use specially trained child advocates to minimize trauma," Detective Rodriguez assured her. "Right now, the most important thing is to secure the evidence and make sure your family is safe." The next few hours passed in a blur of police activity. Technicians photographed everything Robert had touched, collected fingerprints from surfaces throughout our house, and created a detailed inventory of items that might have been disturbed or stolen. Meanwhile, Detective Chen worked with our computers and network equipment, documenting the extent of Robert's digital intrusion and identifying exactly what information he had accessed or stolen. "He's been in your system for at least 8 months," she reported. "He's accessed your email accounts, your cloud storage, your financial records, and your social media profiles. He's also been monitoring your internet activity and capturing passwords for various accounts." 8 months, Sarah repeated numbly. "He's been spying on us for 8 months. But the worst revelation came when Detective Chen discovered Robert's method of operation. He installed keylogger software on your computer during one of his visits," she explained. "Every password you've typed, every message you've sent, every website you've visited, he's been recording all of it." The violation felt exponentially worse, knowing that Robert had been reading our private communications, monitoring our online activities, and essentially living a parallel digital life alongside our real one. Around 4 p.m., Officer Martinez received a call from the team searching Robert's house. Her expression grew increasingly grim as she listened to the report. "We need to talk," she said, after hanging up. She led Sarah and me into the kitchen, away from the children who had returned from their friend's house and were being kept occupied by a victim services coordinator. "What did you find?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Robert Martinez had what can only be described as a shrine to your family in his basement. Hundreds of photographs of you and your children, detailed schedules of your daily routines, floor plans of your house, and psychological profiles that he had apparently been developing over time. Sarah gripped my hand tightly. Psychological profiles, based on his observations and the information he gathered from your digital communications, he had created detailed personality assessments for each member of your family. He knew your fears, your preferences, your relationships, your financial situation, your work schedules, everything. "But why?" Sarah asked. "What did he want?" Officer Martinez hesitated before answering. "We're still investigating his ultimate intentions, but the evidence suggests he was planning something much more serious than simple stalking. He had researched your children's schools, your work locations, your extended family members. He had maps, photographs, and detailed plans that suggest he was preparing for some kind of major incident." The room began to spin. Robert hadn't just been a neighbor with boundary issues or even a simple stalker. He had been planning something that would have destroyed our family. "What kind of incident?" I managed to ask. "We're not sure yet, but he had detailed escape routes planned, false identification documents in preparation, and research into locations where families could be taken and held for extended periods." The implication was clear. Robert had been planning to kidnap our family. Detective Chen joined us in the kitchen, carrying a laptop that she set on our counter. "There's more," she said grimly. "We found evidence that Robert Martinez isn't his real name. He's actually Thomas Bradley, and he has a criminal history in 3 other states involving similar stalking cases." She opened the laptop and showed us a database record. Thomas Bradley was convicted of stalking and attempted kidnapping in Oregon 8 years ago. He served 4 years in prison, was released on parole, and then disappeared from the system when he moved to this state. "He's been using a false identity this entire time," Sarah said, her voice barely audible. "The computer technician job at the school district, the background check when he moved into the neighborhood. His entire identity here was fabricated." Detective Chen confirmed. "He's been hiding in plain sight while planning his next crime." Officer Martinez continued the briefing. "We also found evidence that your family wasn't his first target since moving here. He had preliminary surveillance files on 3 other families in the neighborhood, but yours was by far the most extensive." "Other families?" I asked. "Are they safe?" "We're contacting them now to inform them of the situation and help them secure their homes and computers," Officer Martinez assured us. "But it appears that he selected your family as his primary target and was much further along in his planning with you than with the others." "Why us?" Sarah asked. "Why did he choose our family?" Detective Rodriguez, who had been quiet during most of the briefing, finally spoke. "Based on his psychological profile and the evidence we found, Bradley appears to target families that match a specific criteria: 2 working parents, children between the ages of 5 and 10, suburban location, and families that are socially active and trusting of neighbors." "In other words," Sarah said bitterly, "he targeted us because we were good people who trusted him." "That's often how these predators operate," Detective Rodriguez confirmed. "They exploit the very qualities that make communities strong: trust, neighborliness, and mutual support." The investigation continued for several more hours, but eventually the police finished processing our house and began preparing to leave. Before they departed, Officer Martinez sat down with Sarah and me to explain what would happen next. "Thomas Bradley will be charged with multiple felonies, including stalking, breaking and entering, identity theft, computer crimes, and conspiracy to commit kidnapping," she said. "Given his criminal history and the evidence we found, he's looking at a very long prison sentence." Will we have to testify? Sarah asked. Probably, but we'll do everything we can to minimize your family's involvement in the legal proceedings. The evidence is so extensive that we may be able to secure a plea bargain without putting you through a lengthy trial. What about our safety? I asked. She's going to know that we're the ones who exposed him. He'll be held without bail given his flight risk and the seriousness of the charges, Officer Martinez assured us, and we'll maintain regular patrols in your neighborhood until the case is resolved. After the police left, Sarah and I sat in our living room, surrounded by the evidence of violation that would forever change how we viewed our home. The fingerprint powder on our furniture, the missing items that had been taken as evidence, the knowledge of everything that Robert had done. It all served as a constant reminder that our sanctuary had been compromised. We can't stay here, Sarah said quietly. Every time I walk into the kitchen, I'm going to think about him standing there eating our food. Every time I go upstairs, I'm going to wonder what he did in our bedrooms. I nodded, understanding completely. Even with new locks, better security, and Robert in custody, our home would never feel safe again. The children are going to need therapy, I said. They've been manipulated and traumatized, even if they don't fully understand what happened. We're all going to need therapy, Sarah replied. This kind of violation doesn't just go away because the perpetrator is arrested. That night, for the first time since the security cameras had been installed, I didn't check the footage before going to bed. Instead, I lay awake thinking about all the nights when Robert had been in our house while we slept, all the violations we hadn't known about, all the plans he had been making. The next morning brought another shock. Detective Chen called to inform us that Bradley had been using our internet connection to communicate with other individuals who shared his interests. The investigation had expanded to include federal authorities, and there was evidence of a network of people involved in planning similar crimes. You weren't just victims of a lone stalker, Detective Chen explained. You were targeted by someone who was part of a larger criminal organization specializing in family abduction and exploitation. The scope of what we had escaped was so vast that I couldn't fully process it. Our quiet suburban life had been infiltrated by organized criminals who viewed families like ours as products to be researched, targeted, and ultimately harvested. Over the following weeks, more details emerged about Thomas Bradley's criminal network and his plans for our family. The evidence painted a picture of a sophisticated operation that had been in development for months, with our family as the centerpiece of an elaborate kidnapping and exploitation scheme. Officer Martinez left to obtain a warrant for Robert's arrest, and Sarah immediately called a locksmith. While we waited, I installed 2 additional security cameras upstairs, one in the hallway and one in the children's bedroom. The locksmith arrived first, and I watched from my living room window as he changed all of our locks. Robert was in his yard, tending to his garden, seemingly oblivious to what was happening. He even waved when he saw me watching, that same friendly smile I had trusted for 15 years. The police arrived an hour later. I watched from behind my curtains as Officer Martinez and 2 other officers knocked on Robert's door. They spoke to him for several minutes on his front porch before placing him in handcuffs and leading him to their patrol car. Robert never looked toward our house, even as they put him in the car. Even as neighbors came out to watch the spectacle, he kept his eyes straight ahead. There was something chilling about his composure, his complete lack of surprise or resistance. After the police left, Sarah and I sat our children down again and explained that Mr. Martinez had been doing something wrong and that he wouldn't be coming around anymore. We assured them that they weren't in trouble and that they had done the right thing by telling us the truth. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. Our new locks were installed, our security system was expanded, and Robert Martinez was in custody. I thought our nightmare was over. I was wrong. 2 days later, Officer Martinez called to update me on the case. Robert had been released on bail, which was concerning but not unexpected for a first-time offender facing non-violent charges. But there was something else. When we searched Mr. Martinez's house, Officer Martinez said, "We found some items that belong to you." "What kind of items?" "Family photos, pieces of your children's artwork, a coffee mug with your wife's name on it. There were also detailed notes about your family's routines, schedules, and habits. Mr. Martinez had been documenting your lives for months, possibly years." The room started to spin. "What kind of notes?" "What time you leave for work, when your wife goes grocery shopping, when your children have soccer practice. He knew your schedules better than most people know their own." "Why?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. "We're still investigating, but it appears that Mr. Martinez has been obsessed with your family for some time. The midnight visits were just one component of a much larger pattern of surveillance and stalking." Officer Martinez paused before continuing. "There's something else you should know. We ran a background check on Mr. Martinez and found that he's had similar charges in 2 other states. In both cases, he developed obsessive relationships with neighboring families and engaged in prolonged periods of unauthorized entry and surveillance." My legs gave out, and I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair. Robert wasn't just a neighbor who had crossed boundaries. He was a serial stalker with a history of targeting families like ours. "Why didn't this show up when he moved in?" I asked. "He was never convicted in the other cases. The families chose not to press charges, or the cases were dismissed on technicalities. But the pattern is clear." Sarah, who had been listening on speakerphone, finally spoke. "Are we safe? I mean, he's out on bail. What's to stop him from coming back?" "We've issued a restraining order that prohibits him from coming within 500 feet of your property," Officer Martinez said. "But I'd recommend staying vigilant. Keep your security system active, vary your routines if possible, and call us immediately if you see him anywhere near your house." After hanging up, Sarah and I looked at each other in silence. So our safe suburban neighborhood suddenly felt like a trap. Robert was out there somewhere, probably angry about being caught, possibly planning retaliation. "We need to move," Sarah said quietly. "Let's not make any hasty decisions," I replied, though part of me agreed with her. "Let's see how the legal process plays out." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept checking the security cameras on my phone, scanning for any sign of Robert. Every car that drove down our street made me tense. Every shadow in our yard looked threatening. At 2:30 a.m., I received a motion alert from the camera covering our front yard. My heart stopped as I opened the app, expecting to see Robert standing on our lawn. Instead, I saw a police cruiser parked across the street. Officer Martinez had arranged for extra patrols, and seeing that car made me feel marginally safer. The next few days passed without incident, but the psychological impact was severe. Sarah jumped at every unexpected sound. The children, despite our attempts to shield them, sensed our anxiety and became clingy and fearful. Emma asked multiple times if the bad man was coming back, and Jake started having nightmares. A week after Robert's arrest, Officer Martinez called with another update. Robert had accepted a plea deal that would send him to prison for 18 months, followed by 3 years of probation. As part of the deal, he would be required to move out of state after his release and would be prohibited from contacting our family in any way. 18 months seems light for what he did, Sarah said when I told her. The prosecutor said it was the best they could do given that nothing was actually stolen and there was no evidence of physical harm, I explained. But at least he'll be locked up, and when he gets out, he'll have to leave. What about the house next door? Sarah asked. Who's going to live there? Robert's house went up for sale 2 weeks later. The realtor was honest about the situation, and it took months to find a buyer. During that time, the empty house served as a constant reminder of what had happened. Every time I looked out our window, I thought about Robert moving through our home in the darkness, touching our belongings, watching our children sleep. The new neighbors, the Johnsons, moved in 6 months later. They're a young couple with no children, and they seemed nice enough, but I found myself scrutinizing their behavior, looking for signs of anything unusual. The experience with Robert had fundamentally changed how I view the people around us. Sarah and I also made some changes to our home security. In addition to the cameras, we installed motion sensors, upgraded our door and window locks, and even got a security system that alerts the police automatically if someone enters the house while we're away. But the most significant change has been psychological. When no longer trust easily, when new neighbors moved in across the street, I ran background checks on them. When the mailman started delivering packages to our back porch instead of the front, I questioned his motives. The innocent interactions that make a neighborhood feel like a community now feel potentially threatening. The children have mostly recovered, though Emma still asks us to check her room before bedtime. And Jake sometimes mentions the secret man in his prayers, asking God to keep him away. Sarah has started seeing a therapist to help process the violation and anxiety, and I've considered doing the same. Robert Martinez was sentenced exactly as promised and is currently serving his time in state prison. Officer Martinez told me that he would likely serve the full 18 months, as he has shown no remorse and has been uncooperative with prison counselors. But here's what haunts me most. How many other families has Robert targeted? How many other neighbors trusted him with their spare keys, their children, their sense of safety? And how many other predators are living in plain sight, earning trust and respect while secretly violating the most basic boundaries of privacy and security? The security cameras that were meant to protect us from unknown threats ended up revealing that the real threat was someone we knew and trusted, someone we invited into our lives, someone we considered family. I still check those cameras obsessively. Every night before bed, I scroll through the day's footage, looking for anything unusual, anything threatening. Sarah says, I need to let it go, that we're safe now, that we can't live in fear forever. But she's wrong about one thing. We're not safe. None of us are truly safe, because the Robert Martinezes of the world don't wear signs announcing their intentions. They don't look like monsters or act like criminals. They look like neighbors and friends and trusted members of the community. They look like people you would give your spare key to. The most terrifying part of this entire experience isn't what Robert did to our family. It's the realization that it could happen to anyone, anywhere, at any time. Your neighbor, your friend, your trusted confidant could be living a secret life that intersects with yours in ways you never imagined. Last week, I was reviewing the old footage one more time, looking for clues I might have missed, when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. In one of the videos from before Robert's arrest, I saw him doing something I hadn't noticed before. He was taking photos, not just looking at our family pictures, but taking photos of them with his phone, photos of our children, our home, our personal belongings, which means that somewhere out there, Robert Martinez has a digital collection documenting our private lives. I called Officer Martinez immediately. The prosecutor is looking into additional charges related to the photography, she told me. But since he's already in prison and will be for another year, there's not much more we can do legally. But what about the photos? What if he shared them with someone? What if there are other people who have access to pictures of our children? We're investigating that possibility, she said. But I have to be honest with you, David. Technology makes these situations much more complicated than they used to be. Even if we find evidence that he shared the photos, it would be very difficult to track down everyone who might have seen them. That conversation took place 3 days ago, and I haven't slept since. The idea that intimate photos of my family might be circulating among strangers, that my children's faces might be known to people with malicious intent, is more than I can bear. Sarah thinks we should move. She's probably right. Even with Robert in prison, even with new locks and better security, our home no longer feels like a sanctuary. It feels like a crime scene, a place where our privacy was violated and our trust was shattered. But moving won't erase what happened. It won't delete the photos Robert took or undo the months of surveillance. It won't restore our children's innocence or our belief in the basic goodness of people. What it might do is give us a fresh start, a chance to rebuild our sense of security in a place where the neighbors don't have our spare keys and our trust isn't taken for granted. As I write this, it's been exactly 8 months since I first saw Robert Martinez enter our house on that security camera. 8 months since our world was turned upside down by the revelation that someone we trusted had been systematically violating our home and our lives. The legal case is closed. Robert is in prison. We have new locks, better security, and a restraining order. By any objective measure, we should feel safe. But safety isn't just about locks and cameras and legal documents. It's about trust. And trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to fully restore. Every night, I still check those security cameras. Every morning, I still look for signs that someone has been in our house while we slept. Every new person we meet is subject to scrutiny and suspicion. This is what Robert Martinez stole from us. Not our belongings, not our money, not even our physical safety. He stole our peace of mind, our ability to trust, our sense that our home is a private sanctuary where we can let our guard down. He stole our innocence. And that, more than any prison sentence, more than any restraining order, more than any security system, is the real crime. Because once you know that monsters can look like neighbors, that predators can masquerade as friends, that evil can wear a familiar face, you never quite feel safe again. The security cameras are still recording. Robert Martinez is still in prison, and we are still healing one day at a time, one night at a time, one check lock at a time. But we will never again give our spare key to a neighbor, and we will never again assume that trust is automatically deserved just because someone lives next door and waves when they see us in the yard. Because now we know better. Now we know that sometimes the most dangerous person in your life is the one you never suspected at all.